So today we're going to be having a presentation by Ava Seidelman, who is a lawyer with the state of New Mexico. She works with Chestnut law offices, and she also is a senior legal consultant with Cooperative Catalyst, which works specifically with individuals, groups, and organizations seeking to work to form cooperatives. Very grateful for her joining us today. She's able to work with a lot of our partners, my consulting company at Apex Supplies Technology, and has been able to help them make informed decisions. So later on for the Q&A session, we'll also be joined by Peter Chestnut of Chestnut Law Offices to answer questions. So thank you for joining us today. This session is being recorded and will be made available afterwards to participants and other interested parties. I'll hand it over to you now, Ava. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. As Allegra said, I'm an attorney. I'm actually licensed in Washington, D.C. So I have to say I'm only licensed in Washington, D.C., not in Arizona, and not even in New Mexico, even though I do work here out of New Mexico. But I do have a background in nonprofit and cooperative and other business legal matters. So we will just cover some of the basics, and I'm hoping that this will be as relevant to the people on the call as possible. And I know, as Allegra mentioned, Peter Chestnut I'm really hoping he'll join around 11:30, 11:45, because he has significant background in tribal law. So our firm mostly focuses on tribal law, actually. But I'm sort of the nonprofit specialist. So next slide, please. That I already told you, this is more informational. I can't specifically be your attorney because I'm not licensed in Arizona. So it's informational, and I can, provide advice, but I'm not your attorney. So that's just my disclaimer. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wasn't sure where, the groups on the call were.
Oh, yeah.
Livestock Association. Oh, could everyone mute, please? I wasn't sure where you were with forming a nonprofit organization at the state level. So this focuses primarily on gaining 501c3 tax exemption at the federal level. However, I can quickly go over sort of what it means to form at the state level first, and then we can move on to 501c3 status. So, as you probably know, the main reason any group will form a legal entity at the state or sometimes tribal level, if that's possible, maybe you're doing that, but there's reasons to form at the tribal level and there's reasons to form at the state level. So say you want to form a 501c3 organization, first you need to form a nonprofit corporation with the state of Arizona. And it's possible you might be able to form at the tribal level too. However, that's a bit more complicated, I think. So you would need to form at the state level, and you form that type of legal entity, a nonprofit corporation. And that will get you on a path to then getting tax exempt status and being eligible for donations and grants. But the other reason, of course, to form any kind of legal entity is that you get protection. All of the members or people involved with the organization get protection from personal liability. So say you're sort of operating your livestock businesses together as a group. If you don't have a legal entity, your personal bank account, your personal assets could be at risk if someone were to sue you know, just any of the members who are involved with the group. Everyone's like personal bank accounts could potentially be at risk. So that's the main reason you want to separate, you know, of course, your personal assets from the organization's assets and liabilities. So you form, you know, at the state level, a nonprofit corporation, and it's pretty simple. I believe in Arizona, you know, you have your board, you have your registered agent, your physical, you need some sort of physical location, which doesn't have to be a formal address, but you need a physical location and a mailing address and some other things. So I won't go too much into that now, but that is the first step to get that recognition at the state level. And then once you have that, you know, you can design your bylaws according to 501c3 nonprofit rules to become a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. So that's kind of like the overview. Remember, it's a two-step process. So what is a 501c3 organization? That means it's, as I said, tax exempt at the federal level. That's not the only kind of organization that is tax exempt at the federal level. So if you're just looking to not pay taxes, there's many other ways that you can do that. But the main reason people form 501c3 or attempt to get 501c3 status, which is a particular status you need an application, is to be able to access, you know, donations and grants. So, and the reason why you need that 501c3 status is many federal government programs that provide grants require you to have that status, as well as many private foundations and you know, major donors. They want a tax deduction for providing you with organizations with grants and large donations. So that's the key feature, is that the donor will, you know, get a tax deduction. So they want that 501c3 status. And the government also often wants it for grants, to provide certain kinds of grants. If you're just looking to, you know, form an organization and organize yourselves to have, you know, a common governance structure, a common bank account, and kind of go into business together, you know, you don't need to get 501c3 status. There's other ways that you can get tax exemption, and there's other ways that you can go about doing business. So I would say that unless you really think that you want grants, I wouldn't bother trying to get 501c3 status, but we can get into that later. So again, the two key features of 501c3 nonprofit organizations, are that they have a charitable or educational purpose. And you could also have a scientific or religious, or there's a couple of other categories, but the ones that are most relevant to you are charitable or educational purposes. And I'll go a little bit more into what that mean. And as I mentioned, you're organized as a nonprofit corporation at the state level. And as in your articles of incorporation, you have to have some specific language in there that says you're organized for charitable or educational purposes, according to 501c3 rules, basically. Okay, next slide. So the key benefits to of obtaining 501c3 status in particular is what I mentioned: accessing major donations, grants, etc. Again, federal tax exemption, but you can do that through other other kinds of tax-exempt statuses. The key feature of 501c3 nonprofits is the getting grants and donations. Another thing is a lot of, even though that a lot of different organizations can be nonprofit organizations, just not necessarily 501c3s, but many, like, to be able to get tax exemption, I believe on the state level, in most states, you need to be a 501c3. So, it's just that 501c3 status is kind of like what's considered most important for, like tax exemption on the state level. Also, many companies, sometimes companies will give you discounts if you're a 501c3 nonprofit. If you're just a nonprofit, they might not give you a discount. So I know that's confusing, but again, if you just form like a nonprofit corporation on the state and don't get that 501c3 status, you might not get some of the additional benefits from like discounts, state tax exemption, etc. That probably doesn't apply to you because you're a tribal organization, but it might in some ways. So next slide. Before I get into this, does anyone have any questions so far?
And if you want to ask a question, make sure you check that you're not muted on your screen.
Okay, so I'll continue on with some of the details of getting 501c3 status and maintaining it. You again must have a charitable or educational purpose, and also all of your activities must further that, that they say tax exempt purpose, so charitable or educational. Luckily, charitable does have a broad definition. So when you apply for 501c3 status, you have to, if you're doing the longer form, I'll explain the short versus long form, but if you're doing the longer form, you have to describe all of your activities and how they, fit within your charitable purpose or educational purpose, or both. You have both purposes. So some of the ways that, the IRS thinks of charitable is you are doing things to relieve the poor, distressed, or underprivileged. You're combating community deterioration or juvenile delinquency, or you're lessening the burdens of government. And so even if, with your organization, often you have to, when you're describing what you're trying to do and the activities you engage in to meet that charitable or educational purpose, or sorry, charitable purpose in particular, you have to be creative in terms of how you're saying what you're doing relieves the poor or like lessens the burdens of government. So, that's where sometimes lawyers come in, is to try to get creative in how you're describing what you're doing and why it's charitable. If you're educational, if you're engaging in like education for farmers, then that's fairly straightforward. You're just describing the kinds of education you're providing. So, but it's somewhat of a limitation. I believe the name of the slide, though I can't see it, is I think it's like not totally fitting on the screen, but I think the name of this slide was disadvantages. So in a way, it is a bit of a disadvantage because your organization, kind of always needs to meet those definitions according to the IRS. You can't just do whatever you want. So there's, that's the thing, is they are fairly, they look at what you're doing and they say, are you fitting within these rules and these definitions or not? So yeah, the disadvantage is, you know, you can't do whatever you want if you want to get 501c3 status. And you have to be very creative sometimes about how you are describing what you do. Another couple of restrictions are, and I think the biggest one for, again, 501c3 status only, not anything else, not other kinds of nonprofits necessarily, just 501c3, is the private benefit issue. So basically, this is a very difficult one to explain because it's not black and white. It's hard sometimes to tell you this is what it means and this is what it doesn't mean. And the IRS gives you many examples sometimes that are very confusing. But basically it's saying that you can't give particular benefits to like particular kinds of people. A charitable organization or a 501c3 organization, charitable or educational, needs to provide benefits and services to the public at large. So you can't be too restrictive about giving benefits like only to members. And so that's a tricky one, like with your kind of organization, right? You know, it's possible to have members and to provide them with benefits and to like target a particular group or a particular community. But you also have, the IRS might look at, you know, how restrictive you are. Is it possible for other people who might want to join or access those benefits to do that as well? So I can get in and try to answer some more questions about that later and give you some examples. But that's one of the main reasons why groups like cooperatives and other sometimes associations that are engaging in business or kind of trying to bring together farmers or ranchers, they're coming together to provide their members specific benefits. That's not necessarily what a 501c3 is designed to do. It's designed to provide benefits to kind of the public and not be so restrictive about certain members accessing benefits. So that's I would say the main barrier. And if you want to apply for 501c3 status, I hope that I can help you get around that. And if it's not a good fit, then I wouldn't apply for 501c3 status. There may be other ways to access grants, which I will explain later. The other limitation, I don't know if it's a big issue for the groups here. I think I see Peter's on the call, is lobbying and political campaigning. So the main thing is there's no political campaigning allowed. And that might mean endorsing a candidate, for example. So 501c3 organizations cannot endorse candidates. There's very minimal amounts of lobbying that they can engage in. You can do some, but it's 20%, but I have to check the rules, something like that. But you can engage, you can still engage on policy and inform policymakers, educate policymakers. So there's creative ways that you can be involved in the policymaking process. The other one that I think will be something your group should consider is some limitations on the commercial activity. So again, the IRS does not want 501c3 organizations to just look like regular businesses and compete with regular businesses. They think it's unfair if you're basically operating a business but getting tax exempt status, whereas there's other businesses that don't get tax exempt status. So there's ways that you can engage in commercial activity, but it needs to further your exempt, substantially further your charitable or educational purpose. So it needs to be kind of related to it. And here's an example is, you know, say you're trying to train a certain group of people on how to run a business themselves. But in order to train them, you know, that you're running a business. So there's people who come in and out and like work in the business to learn how to run it. But then they don't stay there for forever. You know, they're kind of there more for training purposes. So that's sort of an example. You can have some business activities, but it can't just kind of look like a regular commercial business. And I can get into more detail if you're interested about that in that issue, that element. Also a complex one. So I think that's basically it. I mean, of course, the other restriction and or disadvantage, I guess you could say, is there's substantial amounts of reporting. Not always substantial, it depends on how big you are, but you do have to report on a yearly basis to the IRS on your financials and other, you know, I think updating them on your board members, for example. And, you know, there's fees as well. So next slide, please. So there are two ways that you can apply for 501c3 status, and it depends on how big you are, how much income your organization expects to have, or already has. Form 1023 is the main way to apply. That's kind of a general application for nonprofit organizations. That's the way that everyone used to have to apply, and but now it's only the application if you make more than $50,000 a year in gross receipts or gross income, or if you expect to make more than $50,000 a year for the next 3 years. So the tricky thing about that is there's actually no penalty if you end up making more than $50,000 a year. So unless you really know that you're going to make $50,000 a year or more, you know, you basically can apply through the 1023 easy, which I'm going to explain. So it's really like if some funder has told you, yes, we're going to give you a grant for $75,000 next year. They've already said they're going to give it to you as soon as you get your status, or, you know, you just typically, like, your organization has run for a while, like yours, if you have membership fees and they always amount to more than $50,000. In those cases, you probably should apply with the Form 1023. But in other cases where you're really not sure what your budget's going to look like, you just don't know, then you can apply with the Form 1023 easy. The 1023 is a long and complex form. You have to put a lot of financial information in that form. It requires, it's very substantial. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of sort of legal questions about how you operate. So it's hard to do it if you don't have a legal background. You have to put in an extensive narrative of activities, and you have to submit your bylaws and articles of incorporation. In the narrative of activities, you have to explain how, you know, your organization is furthering its charitable or educational purpose, specifically through its activities. With the 1023 EZ, it's very simple. You don't even have to submit your articles or bylaws. You just have to say they're in line with 501c3 rules. Again, that's for organizations that make $50,000 a year or less in anticipated gross receipts. And it's completed online only, and the fee is also lower. It's about half the amount. Okay, next slide. Was there one before that? I can't. Okay, that's the last one, I think. Is that, okay, yeah, just the one after that.
This is the next one that comes up.
The next one, okay. So there are, so I wrote tribally chartered association. This is just, these are two approaches to 501c3 status, regardless of whether you're tribally chartered or have a nonprofit corporation. I think it's actually more relevant if you have a nonprofit corporation at the state level. So you can, change you could try to take your existing organization and make it conform to the 501c3 requirements. That might mean changing your articles of incorporation and bylaws substantially. If you've already formed, you might have to file articles of amendment. And then you can apply once it's, in line with 501c3 rules, you can then apply that organization, nonprofit, can apply for 501c3 status. The benefits is that you don't have to form an entirely new organization at the state level and, pay the separate fees and administer that organization. The downsides is that you might be changing your organization in some way that you might, in a way that you might not want to change it. Might restrict your activities just to become a 501c3. It might change the nature of your organization. And so another approach is to form a new nonprofit corporation at the state level that's really just designed to bring in these grants and donations, again, which is the main reason you would want to form a 501c3. So you can create bylaws and articles of incorporation just for the purpose, mostly for the purpose of your charitable and educational purposes, for bringing in grants. You can maybe keep that organization somewhat separate in a different structure than say you have more of a sort of a cooperative membership type of an organization, which there's certain reasons you may want to organize in that way and provide benefits to members. You could keep that organization separate from a different nonprofit 501c3, which is designed, again, to bring in grants to provide education or do other things that might support your membership organization. So those are two approaches. And then actually the third is that you really don't form any new nonprofit or don't apply for 501c3 status at all. You can actually find another 501c3 organization to use to help to administer your grants and to apply for grants and get major donations. There are organizations that are willing to do that. So your charitable and educational programs are essentially part of their organization. They fit within that organization's mission, and you're just sort of your charitable and educational programs are, just run through that organization. So you're partners in a way. Then you don't have to worry about having your own nonprofit 501c3. Next slide, please. So this is kind of just building off of what I just said. You can either apply independently for 501c3 status, you know, again, first having to incorporate at the state level, if you haven't already, or most likely, and then apply. Or the other approach is, of course, to get a fiscal sponsor. I'm just saying that because if your main goal is to access grants and donations, you don't necessarily need to apply on your own. Peter and I are involved with an organization called Cooperative Catalyst of New Mexico, and that for over 3 years now, we have basically not been our own organization. We're part of another organization that serves as our fiscal sponsor, and they administer all our grants. We don't have very much independence, so that is a downside. You don't, you know, you have to do things the way your fiscal sponsor wants to do them in terms of administration. They might be slower than you want. They might require you to meet certain rules and do things the way according to their policies. You also often have to pay a fiscal sponsor fee in that case. So, but on the other hand, administering your own nonprofit 501c3 is, you know, it's a big job. There are a lot of rules that you need to comply with, and then there's yearly reporting. You have to file Form 990 every year with the IRS, and you need to really be on top of your finances and your grant administration if you're getting grants. So I think that's the last slide. So that's our contact information. Sorry, the address is wrong. We have a new address. We have Aaron Sims. I put him down in our office as well because he, is, involved with similar work, and I'm actually going to be going on leave for a couple months, so put him down just in case. Do we have any questions? And Peter Chestnut is here. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Peter Chestnut, lawyer at Chestnut Law Offices, and supporting Eva in this presentation about, I guess, your questions about seeking whether to seek tax-exempt status, and if so, how to do it. So I'm joining late to be available for the question and answer period. I've been involved with co-ops and tribal organizations for many years, and also, through the office, been involved in setting up a number of tax-exempt organizations under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. So hopefully we can be of service. I can be helpful today in this conversation.
So we have some time for question and answer now. If you'd like to ask a question, you can write it in the chat, or you can unmute your computer and pose it to the group.
Hello, this is Olga John, and I am trying to decide whether or not I want to, have my farm be a nonprofit organization, and it's located on the reservation in Oslany. But I was wondering, I had heard something about that, and I'm wondering if it has something to do with the 1023 and the 1023 easy, about whether or not, do both of them have to have a board?
Oh, but you got muted. You were trying to finish the question.
So what my question was, like, for both of them, is a board needed for both of them? Because I was talking with Stacy from North Loop, and he had mentioned something about there was a nonprofit status to where it's just one person who, you know, like, heads it up. Is that like true, or what?
Let me take a step back, because yeah, we didn't really go over what it takes to form a nonprofit corporation, because I wasn't sure if that's the information everyone wanted. But yes, to form a nonprofit corporation, which is the first step, you do need a board of directors. In Arizona, I believe you can have a board of one person. But I don't think anyone would recommend that. I think having a board of at least 3 people, and I think the IRS would want to see that as well. So having a board of directors of probably 3 people would be a best practice minimum to form the organization at the state level. Peter, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I'd just say that I think it's helpful to look at, there are kind of 2 elements here. One is the creation of the organization, and the second is, what is the tax status for the organization? And so the creation can be, is normally a matter of state law and potentially tribal law if you have a tribally chartered entity. But if you want to get tax exempt recognition from the federal government, that's when you get to the Form 1023 or 1023EZ. But you've got to create an organization first before you can use either one of those application forms.
Yeah, don't get too caught up in the 1023 versus 1023EZ. Those are just like literally the form that you choose. They're different fees and they're a little bit different. But I think thinking fundamentally about those 2 pieces Peter mentioned, and separating them is important.
There's another factor for tribal lands. If you're a tribal member farming on your lands, that I think there's some federal law from a long time ago that essentially puts that outside, you know, your net profits would not be taxable to the federal government. But I think the main reason that many people create nonprofits to get tax exempt status is because they're seeking grants from other tax exempt organizations. But if you're just farming, I don't know that there's a need to create a tax exempt organization if your source of revenue is going to be from your farm. If you're seeking grant funding, that's when having an organization that can receive money in a tax exempt way is important.
All right, thank you. Another part of that was CIM, trying to do like grants and stuff like that. I'm trying to figure out the best way to start the corporation, and that's why I'm here today, is just to find out, you know, what kind of like the pros and cons of having a nonprofit, because I was thinking about going in as an LLC also, but like I'm like very new to this. I have like really no idea about, you know, about any of this. So, but what you guys are doing is very helpful. The information.
Well, the choice of corporate form is an initial question that you need to answer. And as you've mentioned, the LLC, limited liability company, is one way. that's an option that's become available under most state laws. And those are taxed as for-profit businesses. They're not nonprofit. So again, a lot depends on your purpose. I think that the slides that Eva prepared were based on the assumption that you wanted, that you had an organization and wanted to know whether to make it tax exempt or not. But again, I think the key question is, are you going to try to seek funding, grant funding? And if so, that's when a 501c3, either an organization itself or one that you could get a fiscal sponsor that was 501c3 to receive money from a granting organization for your benefit is worthwhile. But that then would feed into your choice of entity, that if you go the limited liability company route, it's easier to set up and many fewer reporting requirements, but it's a taxable entity.
And I will say that seeking grants is not an easy thing. It definitely requires, you need a good grant writer. There's a lot of organizations out there seeking grants. And so you should really know, you should have a pretty decent idea, like, of, what are the funders that you think you could qualify for, the grants that you can qualify for, and look out for the funders and the government grants to see if, you'd be a competitive entity for that grant. If you're just sort of trying to be a farmer and go into business, probably something like an LLC would be a good idea.
Okay, yeah, because I was actually working with Apex. We're on like a NAF grant, and with North Loop Family Farms, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So yeah, that's why I'm here. It's just to, kind of figure things out, because I'm, aiming for next year. I'm still, like learning all the different, I guess all the different things about it.
Yeah, so Olga, the NAF grant, the Native American Agriculture Fund grant that we are working with you and North Loop Family Farms on. North Loop Family Farms would be the would be kind of the main recipient, and would be able to provide some funding to you through that particular program. It's allowable to provide funding to small farmers, like with them as a fiscal sponsor. That is an avenue for LLCs to get grant funding at times, depending on what the grantor deems is allowable. It's really up to the grantor to see what they want to do. And there are a couple federal grant programs that allow funding to go to beyond nonprofit organizations, specifically to farms, usually, including the Value Added Producer Grant and Local Food Promotion Program. Both of those are eligible to go to farmers, and usually there's classifications of the kind of farmers that can apply for those. But there's a lot more. There are a lot more grants available to 501c3 organizations, but like Ava pointed out, it's a very competitive process, and it helps to, regardless if you're gonna go in and get the 501c3 status yourself, it really helps to be connected to other organizations, other farmers, other nonprofits, and technical consulting or firms like Apex that can help out with that. Do we have any questions from any of the GALA members about the presentation that we've seen today? About the specifics of what you all are going through right now?
This is Annika. I got a text from Homer saying that he was unable to mute his phone right now. I'm not sure if he's on mute or if he got on and tried to log back on again. But I had a question. So our organization is divided into 7 groups. If only 2 of those organizations, 2 of those 7 file for grants or use grants, does that mean all of us file under one, or is it necessary for us to all use the grants if we're going to do it that way? Or will we file independently because the majority are not using grants? That's my question. Just, I know we're new to this, and that's just a question. I know that it got me when you said you file independently if you don't use grants, but it's probably better to.
Well, this is Peter. If you have an existing organization that gets a grant, it doesn't have to be spread across everybody. If your grant application says we're going to help 2 of the 7, and
okay,
the existing organization says we want to ask for that money for that purpose, and you do, and they give you the money for that purpose, then you got to spend it for the purpose you said you were going to do it for.
Okay.
Can you be a little more specific about how you're structured? So what do you mean by your organization has 7 different organizations? Can you describe?
Well, we just kind of break it up like different areas, parts of the land, since we are such a big area. So like 2 or 3 people take care of a certain part on the land, and then we all meet together as an organization and share our issues, or just things that we could do to better our areas. And I know that there is some parts, or some areas that will that do think it's or may have some interest in getting grants to better their land, like solar wells, anything that has to do with the land, maybe water issues and things like that. So that's how we're, I guess, broken up. Is there are certain people that take care of different areas of our land that we have here.
Right, but would I be right in thinking that they're essentially kind of district or land areas which together have come together to form one organization, the
Yes.
GALA organization?
Yes. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question.
Have you worked with or considered working with an existing 501c3 organization just for grants, or there's really no organization that you've partnered with so far, your particular district, to get grants?
I think we work a lot through the nation to get our grants and what their, I guess, what grants they have for us available. I don't know if Homer can answer that. I believe it would be the 501c3 that the tribe uses.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Homer.
Yeah. Yeah, I was when you were talking about the association itself, it's broken down into 7 range units, and each range unit keeps their funds to run their operations, and they have range bosses that meet. We try to meet on a monthly basis to report all the activities, the financial revenues and expenditures. And right now, the association is trying to revise, and I know that there was, I think there was 2 different approaches or 3 different approaches And just looking at what we have as an organization as far as the funding, each ranch, and to me, each ranch should report their how much monies they have within their ranch, and then total them all up for the organization, the Gu'Achi Livestock Association, which is a blanket organization, and that'll give us a total amount, and hopefully up to 50,000, if not less. But that's how they operate on, and I know that we were talking about the different ways to approach it, and one is the 1023 easy. Now, if we file with the state as a corporation, you know, does that give us tax-exempt capabilities, or do we have to file with the federal for tax-exempt?
Yeah, they're two separate processes. So no, just filing with the state will not give you federal tax exempt status, 501c3 or otherwise necessarily. So no.
So you need to do both.
Yeah.
You need to have a nonprofit entity, and then that entity has to apply for the tax exempt recognition from the federal government.
Yes, I know that we did that with the SWIA organization. They were an organization that was nonprofit, and then they did apply for with the federal government, with the IRS, for the tax exempt status. Now, in this case, with the Gu'Achi Livestock Association, and that's what I'm trying to do with this organization, is to start a new one, because a lot of the information that's on the previous articles and bylaws of the association are outdated. They need to be revised to come up to the present status of what it is as an organization. And that's why we wanted to do revise the organization's articles and bylaws, and also change the name to a new organization. Because I know that there's some issues that are coming up that that we have to deal with as an organization. And in order to deal with it, we have to start out fresh with what we have now. And that's what we're trying to shoot for, is to, do a new organization with a new revised articles and bylaws. But at this point, I know that some of the range units, well, I think there's like 2 of them that have applied for EQIP under the USDA for the EQIP programs, but we've never gotten a grant, and I don't think they'll ever apply for a grant. But just to have that status, if they ever wanted to, yes, yeah, that would apply. But for right now, the organization hasn't applied for any grants at all. It's mainly through the NRCS EQIP programs that they utilize to operate on. And when you say charitable, that's what the organization is, and they do provide education, try to help the community members. But the other thing is that the association stock and the individual members, the individual members, when they sell their stock, they have to report it when they do their taxes. Okay, the other one, that's that are sold for the organization, that needs to be reported too. And that's one of the things that we wanted to see if we can apply for that status, so we we will be tax exempt on the association stock. So now how does that, you know, do you have some sort of direction that we can maybe go that way as far as this organization?
So you want to form,
Anybody?
so yeah, it sounds like you're not necessarily looking for specific grants. That's not like your main goal. You're trying to do other things as well, and you want to form a new organization on the state level with bylaws and that will help to structure that organization. Is that, and you know, provide you with that state level status? I'm just trying to understand your main goal, because sometimes getting 501c3 status is hard to, it's hard to get, especially if you have more than $50,000 in revenue and gross receipts per year. It's a long application, and if you're not necessarily looking to some very specific grants, maybe you could get tax exemption a different way, and then try to get grants through a different 501c3 organization. So are you really looking to specific grants right now? Do you have some in mind?
Like I said, we haven't really, it has to be a joint effort among the association members, what they want. And like I said, right now, they're not specifically looking for any kind of a grant, but just to try to revise the articles and bylaws. And that's why I'm trying to ask if, you know, would it be okay to file as a corporation under the state, but we won't be tax exempt, right?
You may be able to get tax exempt, like it would actually be a default tax exempt status through, Peter, I don't know if you agree, but just as a 501c4, there's other kinds of ways you can actually get tax exempt status. You just won't qualify for grants. So,
and I would point out that grants from the federal government, the United States Department of Agriculture or the Natural Resource Conservation Service, those are directed to farmers and ranchers, and I don't think you need to have a tax exempt organization to get money from them. But if you want to get money from private foundations, that's when you need the 501c3 tax exempt status. And as Eva points out, that 501c3 by its number is one of several ways that an organization can have its own income not be taxable, but it would not be a charitable deduction outside of 501c3. Those others, 501c1 through 501c19 or so, and Eva mentioned 501c4, could be, the income of that organization could be tax exempt, but contributions to it would not be tax deductible from individuals or private foundations.
So my question is if we go with like a 501c, what did you say, 4? Then that would be just with the state level?
No, to get any sort of tax exempt recognition, you need to apply at it's an application at the federal level. And if it's going to be an entity, you need to organize either at the state level or through the tribe, but there has to be an entity that then applies for tax exempt status. It's, as we said before, it's a two-step process. You have to have an entity either existing or created, and then that entity has to apply for tax exempt status.
Okay. So in either case, you still have to go through the two-step process.
Yes.
But the 501c3 would also get tax exempt as well as a 501c4.
Right. 501c3's advantage is not only is the income of the organization not taxable, but gifts to it are tax deductible from individuals or other entities. And that's not true for the other 501c3 kinds of or statuses where the organization's income can be tax exempt, but gifts to it are not tax exempt. Eva, do you have more?
Oh, I was gonna say, with the other kinds of 501Cs, so other kinds of tax exempt statuses, it's much, much easier. I think in some cases, you might not even have to pay a fee. It's not a long application. And in some cases, there's a way you can sort of just notify the IRS that you're operating as, for example, 501c4, that you're operating as a 501c4. So it's much easier. So yes, you do need to follow the rules that the IRS has and maybe file like one form, but it's much easier. You don't have to report as much for any of the other tax exempt statuses other than 501c3. So yes, it is still sort of a two-step process, but not as extensive as the 501c3 process.
Okay, but and again, like this organization, I guess it was filed under charitable. But like I said, we do webinars with the assistance of SWIA to educate our association members, how to operate and what they can benefit from being a nonprofit organization.
Right. And I think the main issue I think we would need to learn a little bit more about your organization, and the main barrier for your organization in terms of 501c3 status is how you're structured and the kinds of benefits that you provide to members, and also the amount of revenue that you're bringing in, because that of course makes the application a lot more complicated. So even if you are charitable, you do charitable and educational things, that's great, and you might be able to get a different kind of tax exempt status. But to go for the C3 to get grants, private grants from private foundations, we need to look at a little bit more detail, like the details of how your organization is structured. And you might not want to change things just to get 501c3 status. Maybe that's not a really important goal for you. So.
Yeah, because in the articles and bylaws, they just state nonprofit cooperative association. It never stated if it was a 501c3 or anything else when it was formed in 1962. And so now we're trying to upgrade it because it's very outdated and we need to make a lot of changes in there. And that's the whole gist of what we're trying to do.
Right. Well, the default is that the entity is taxable unless you get recognition from the Internal Revenue Service that you're not. So currently, your nonprofit cooperative association, if it makes any money, it's subject to income tax. If it doesn't make any money, then there's nothing to tax.
Yeah. The thing is that when the association stock are sold, all that money goes back into the operation of the ranch that they take care of. And so that money doesn't go to any of the association members. It strictly goes back into operating of the ranch, with all the ranch structures that are out there and for the livestock that are out there. But the individual owners are the ones that have to report it to IRS and pay their taxes if they sold, some cattle or horses or whatever case may be. Then they would have to report it on their own income tax. But as far as the association stock, all of the monies that are made goes right back into that ranch or that range.
So it sounds like the organization doesn't have any taxable income, right? If whatever you get, you spend, you know, from sale of the organization's livestock is then spent for your purpose, which is to improve the range.
The operation.
Yeah, then you have no income to be taxed at the end. So you don't need to get recognized as a tax exempt organization. You just don't have to pay taxes because you don't have any taxable income, because it's revenue minus expenses is what gives you taxable income.
Yeah, it's the individual members getting a 501c3 status for the organization or a different tax exempt status, I think won't exempt those individual members ever from paying taxes from sale of their livestock. That's income to them. So that's not going to solve that problem. Yeah.
So, I mean, right now it's just for the association cattle that we want to get the tax exempt, because, like I said, all the revenues that's made with the cattle sales goes right back into the range. But I do know that the individuals have to pay taxes on whatever they sold, which they're supposed to report anyway. That's other income on their tax when they file their taxes. Am I correct?
Yep. Yeah, revenue from any source is taxable, as is the general presumption. But that, you know, if you're a business, it's not based on your top line revenue. It's based on your income. Revenue minus expenses is where they calculate taxable income. And so if the association sells its livestock and then spends all of that revenue for range improvements, then you have no taxable income. And you don't, you know, regardless of whether you've applied for tax exempt status. So as Eva said earlier, unless you're really going to go after grants, it doesn't sound like the association really needs to take that second step of seeking federal recognition from IRS as a tax exempt organization. You're operating in a nonprofit fashion in the sense that
just for my information. So yeah, just for my information. So we can just go up to the state level as a corporation. Am I correct?
Yeah, if you do that, and then all the revenue that the state chartered entity receives is spent for your business purpose, and so that you have no taxable income at the end of the year, that's possible.
Okay. Yeah. So okay, like I said, it goes right back to the operation. So at the point when we do our articles and bylaws, then I guess we can file with the state of Arizona as a corporation and not go any farther, because, like you said, you know, no revenues minus expenses, no taxes need to be paid because it's all going back into the operation.
Right.
Okay.
And that would happen even if you just amended the bylaws of your existing nonprofit cooperative association. It would be this. I mean, that's your situation now.
Right. That's what we're shooting for. Anybody there?
Yeah. It sounds like it could be a solution.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I think if you want to put in some 501c3 language just in case, you could do that. I think the main thing is figuring out your membership structure, and, you know, whether that could really hinder you from getting 501c3 status along the way. If you want to put in, you know, some of the 501c3 language and you don't think it would alter your organization and the way you do things now, maybe it won't hurt, you know, maybe it's something that you might want to do so that you don't have to amend them later in case you do want to go for grants and apply for 501c3 status. So it's kind of, it's sort of up to you. But maybe it wouldn't hurt. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to make one of your purposes charitable and educational, and then you just wait to see if you actually want to go ahead and apply. It's not always easy, but you could think about that later.
Okay.
501c3, and that's after you form at the state level. So you could just go for your state incorporation, nonprofit incorporation. And then cross the bridge of 501c3 later if you ever think you want to do that.
Well, and if that happens later, then you might want to think about working with a fiscal agent who has tax exempt status to receive, you know, if you're seeking a grant from a private foundation. But I've often said that you know, if you're a cooperative and you're trying to benefit your members, that there's a tension there with the 501c3, which is you're not supposed to benefit your members. And so it sounds like going for 501c3 is not really what I'm hearing this man saying is in his vision of how the organization or the people want to go forward from here.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, at this point, I guess the association will probably go up to the state level as a corporation, and then maybe sometime in the future, think about, like I said, crossing over later with the IRS. As a tax exempt.
Yeah, and Homer, we can certainly have SWEDA, the Southwest Indian Agricultural act as a fiscal agent for GALA in the meantime, if you all want to start looking at some of the grant opportunities that might be out there to help with, you know, things like you know, range improvements or well development, or, you know, some of that stuff that might take a little bit more money that the association can come up with itself from its stock sales. Working with SWEDA as fiscal agent could be the first step that we take in helping GALA determine, you know, if they want to continue with grant work. You know, run a grant with GALA and SWEDA together. See how that plays out. See if you guys want to go for 501c3 in the future.
Okay, I just have a question on that the 501c3 at the state level, nonprofit organization at the state level. You know, if we ever wanted to, since we have our articles and bylaws, can we get assistance from another nonprofit, say example SWEDA, for some of the range improvements that we need if we needed to do that?
Yeah, of course you can. You can get assistance. So just because you get your own status doesn't mean you can't get assistance from other organizations.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I think looking at your structure to see if, you know, to see whether it's worth planning for the future. If you really do want your own 501c3 status in the future and you don't want to have to amend your articles again, you can look into see if that makes sense. to plan for a future application, or whether it just makes sense to stay as a basically a cooperative that's primarily organized to benefit your members. It sounds like maybe that would be a better direction for now.
Okay.
Yeah, Homer, I would think that too, that right now, like earlier Peter said that the 50C3 can't benefit, but yet we do benefit as an association from it. So I think that would be our step, is to apply for the nonprofit at the state level and just do the nonprofit incorporation, and then look over what our purpose is, you know, what we do as an organization, and then what other tax exempt statuses we can get if we decide to do that.
Yeah, I guess at this point we just need to pass our revised articles and bylaws, and then file with the state, and then think about the crossover later on.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that we can talk about later.
Okay.
The 501 deal, because I know I was looking at the 501c4, and that says it's for social welfare.
Right.
And then there's another one at the bottom that's just a nonprofit. So I guess there's different 501s that we could apply for. We just have to talk about it with everyone else to figure out, you know,
right,
what our purpose is and what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we can kind of go over that later.
Yeah, and then I like when Peter said that it's kind of like farmers trying to build a business, because I think that's basically kind of what we are. It's just, you know, ranchers trying to better what we're doing and providing for others and ourselves to keep going. But that's all I have, and I appreciate you setting this up, so I got a better idea of what's what and what this 501c3 is about. And I wish there was other members that could be listening in. And then I thank all of those that do listen in, and hopefully we can come together to decide or figure out what we understood from this.
Yeah, that was the whole point of trying to educate them, but evidently not too many people are interested. So, but hopefully if I can get a copy of the recorded webinar here, then we could probably do it later, show it to them, or make hard copies of the presentation to give to the members.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, if the slideshow that you were showing was going to be or could be sent to us, so we could provide them that information.
Ava, is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
And, you know, now that we're kind of hearing a little bit more about your goals, I'm not sure how relevant it will be to them. We can also create like a little memo or something explaining, you know, what it means to incorporate at the state level. And then if you want tax exemption, what are the different kinds of tax exemption or ways to not pay taxes? And then what's the main goal of a 501c3?
Yeah.
You want to do that.
Yeah.
That might be more relevant. This is very much focused on 501c3, which we don't even know. It looks like it might not make sense for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Even if you do provide it, they'll be able to see that, okay, maybe we don't need this. And yeah, whatever else you can put together so we can give to them, so they can kind of get an idea of what we should do.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions today, we can wrap up.
Let's see here. Okay. I guess that'll do it for us. And thank you for the information that you provided. It's really helpful. And thanks again to Peter and yourself for the